So, hi everyone. So, nandito na naman tayo ngayon sa week 10 ng klase natin. We are already on the history of terrorism in the Philippines. So, it is an international fact-finding mission report. According here to the objectives, we are going to learn about describing the emergence of insurgents and terrorism in the Philippines, associate terrorism with cultural and of course religious aspects, explore the various initiatives of the Philippine government to counter terrorism and address insurgency. So first muna, general context muna tayo, okay? So general context, saan yung Philippines of course? It is located in Southeast Asia. The Republic of the Philippines comprised of 7,107 islands, which are commonly divided in three groups. We have Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. The capital city is of course Manila in Luzon. Is located in Luzon. So Philippines is the 12th most populated in the world, with 96 million inhabitants. So ngayon, umabot tayo ng almost more than 100 rather. It is also the fourth largest Catholic nation with about 80% of Christians, whereas Muslims form a minority throughout the country, approximately 5%. So the rest of the population is made up of mostly the smaller Christian denomination as well as indigenous people, part of our animists. So, before its independence in 1946, the country was successively dominated by Spanish in 16th to 19th century and by the United States of America in 1898 and 1946. So before Spanish colonization, bago yan, part of the inhabitants were animists, while part were Muslims. As a result of trade with the Arabs, Spanish colonization imposed Christianity upon the country, and the Muslims were called Moros. Today, Bangsamoro or the Moro people are mainly settled in southern islands in Mindanao, mainly Basilan, Sulu, Tawi-Tawi, and Palawan. They were never colonized neither by Spain nor by the USA, which introduced a system of government that was criticized for leading to the minorization and marginalization of the Moros and indigenous people in Mindanao. So the ancestral domain of Moros and indigenous people was declared a public land. This is an issue still bearing consequences today. The indigenous people's claims to ancestral domains being still not recognized. So when independence was declared on July 4, 1946, and the Republic of the Philippines was established, it comprised Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. So the Moros reiterated their objections, but Mindanao was nevertheless incorporated under the Republic. From the independence onwards, Muslim and indigenous people have been complaining that they are marginalized politically and economically, except for a few rich families. The Philippines counts natural resources comprising oil, timber, nickel, cobalt, silver, and gold. In addition, its soils is rich and fertile. But land tenure has been and still a controversial issue across history. Kaya nga, nag-aagawan ng lupa, hindi lang po ng territory ng China at saka Philippines. Of course, there is also a controversy here, yung mga territory natin or land tenure in Mindanao, specifically. About how the population in rural and agricultural is the primary and often only source of income for rural people, whereas important land is owned by powerful landlords. And agrarian reform is going and should end in 2008. But concrete implementation is extremely protracted because of landowners' resistance, and this generates frequent tensions. So dahil sa agawan ng lupa, nagkameron ng tension, and that tension probably had caused to terrorism. Okay, so the communists, meron tayong mga komunista dito. So sino sila? The communists or CP, NPA, and NDFP, the Communist Party of the Philippines was established in 1968 by Jose Maria Sison. Buhay pa to, si Jose Maria Sison. A professor at the University of the Philippines, CPP adopted a strategy based on the struggle for national democracy through a two-stage revolution. A protracted people war to be followed by socialist revolution. 1 year later, the NPA was organized as the guerrilla military wing of the party to wage a peasant worker revolution war in the country against landlords and foreign companies. CPP heads the National Democratic Front of the Philippines, or NDFP, which is the political democratic arm of CPP-NPA. It is estimated that the guerrilla army of CPP now consists of about 10,000 persons. So, ganyan na po sila karami. So, CPP-NPA has been labeled as terrorist organizations by the US government and by the European Union or EU Council. The Philippine government has not made a formal decision classifying NPA as terrorist group, but it openly considered it as such. CPP-NPA or NDFP sees itself as a broad political, revolutionary, and liberation movement and claims that it does not attack civilian targets and it adheres to international law. Ano sa tingin nyo? Okay, so NPA rebellions claimed responsibility for the assassination of 2 congressmen in May 2001, whom it considered as legitimate targets. So former CPP Chair Rodolfo Salas acknowledged that in 1980s internal purge of persons suspected to be government and army infiltrators within CPP resulted in torture and execution of about 1,800 cadres and civilians. This fact is still used by the government and by the country and by the army to attribute the responsibility of current extrajudicial killing to CPP. So there is indeed peace efforts to end the armed conflict between government, the Philippines, and the NPA had been ongoing for almost 21 years, but stalled in 2004. On June 16, 2006, President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo declared an all-out war against NPA. However, on September 5, 2007, she signed conditional to the respect of certain criteria, an amnesty proclamation to be effective only after Congress has approved it. So peace talks stall with one substantive agreement as an achievement, though the comprehensive agreement on respect of human rights and international humanitarian laws, or CARIL, to oversee the implementation of this agreement by both sides. The parties have appointed a joint monitoring committee, or JMC, although it has convened since 2004 and it has not agreed upon common procedure. It has continued to register complaints about human violations or dangerous amalgam between CPP, NPA, and legal leftist organizations. So, a recent statement made by President Arroyo during a visit she paid to the Local Peace and Security Assembled, or LPSA, of the Bicol region on December 13, 2007 shows that the executive branch of the government does not allow distinguish between groups promotion ideology in peaceful way and group using arms and violence to promote the same ideology. Indeed, President Arroyo thanked LPSA for supporting her vision to eradicate communism in the country by year 2010. So President Arroyo spoke about communism as such and not only about communist insurgency. So during a meeting in FID, or mission, with the AAP Vice Chief of Staff and a dozen of high-ranking officers at the AAP General Headquarters on August 16, 2007, AAP denied any implication in extrajudicial killing. So the senior military prosecutor present at the meeting told the FID mission that groups such as NPA, MILF, and Abu Sayyaf are clearly enemies of the state, and that AAP is acting in the framework of the law. So the senior military prosecutor added that there are legal groups supporting NPA and MILF, and that not all members of those legal groups are considered enemies of the state. So do you believe that? So I think the fact that you have engagement with people, you are also considered as one of them. However, according to these high-ranking officers, some prominent members of those groups have been identified on the basis of documents allegedly recovered by AFP as giving an order to kill civilians. Unfortunately, AFP did not provide the FID mission with a written list of names and did not inform it about resulting judicial proceedings. Moreover, the same senior military prosecutor told FID mission that the AAP soldiers and officers can tell and recommend to people, especially in zones where NPA is active, to avoid joining legal groups. So leftist organization, ano ba yung leftist? Are labeled as enemies of the state. Legal and peaceful organizations like peasants or fishermen associations, mass organizations or political parties like Bayan or Anak Pawis are often amalgamated with CPP-NPA, which is an armed group. So in February 2006, Arroyo declared a week-long emergency in response to alleged conspiracies involving members of the opposition, including leftists, but also rightists and members of the military. At least 100 of leftists were belonging to legal and peaceful organizations or to armed ones were arrested. Charges seem largely groundless and politically motivated. So sa 2005 naman, a slide presentation entitled Know the Enemy was reported made available to the public. Among others is listed legal front organizations like party list groups, religious organizations, women organizations, student associations, allegedly allied with CPP-NPA. So right now, diba, there is this connection sa mga taga-UP daw. Doon nagkakameron ng mga recruitment. So sa student association, be careful tayo dyan. And hence considered as enemies of the state. Despite official denial by AP, it is reported that many different stakeholders that AFP further broadcasted on TV a similar propaganda film in 2006. After the issuance of the February state of emergency, the film intended to discourage people to belong a list of legal left organizations, accusing the latter of being too close to NPA. So in parallel, 3 books entitled The Trinity of War were also issued by AFP, which also contained a list of organizations labeled as allied CPP-NPA, including peaceful and legal political parties. Finally, orders of battle have reported been established, identifying sectoral groups or people belonging to a particular category such as farmers, youth, women, or workers, allegedly to be fronts of the communist underground. The order battle is a list of enemies ranked according to their importance. According to Philippine Peasant Organization or KMP, the documents not use the term kill but say neutralize. General Palparan has reportedly been the leading military figure promoting these guidelines. When asked about these previous statements, accusing organizations such as Bayan, Karapatan, or Gabrela, that women organization as front organization of NPA, General Palparan neither confirmed nor denied having made such statements. The legal left-wing political party Anak Pawis also has reported been labeled as front organizations, as Crispin Cabel Bibiltran, member of House of Representatives elected on Anak Pawis party list, says election law foresees that any political party advocating for or engaged in the use of arms should be dismissed. Hence, as long as no violence is found of such acts, all political parties, including so-called leftists, one should not suffer from any labeling. Would it not be the case? Pressure would be put on electors so as to encourage them to support other parties. This practice of labeling is extremely worrying. Why? Especially since the majority of victims of human rights violations belong to so-called leftist organizations. Even if they might share the same ideology, a clear distinction should be drawn between peaceful legal parties and organization on one hand and the armed groups on the other hand. Kaya magpaiga po yun. How about Muslim secessionists, MNLF or MILF? There are 2 main Muslim armed groups in the Philippines which were initially forming one single movement, or the Moro National Liberation Front, MNLF, and Moro Islamic Liberation Front, MILF, which appeared later. Both advocate for the independence of southern islands of Mindanao, but MILF agenda is more rooted in Islam. The Moro National Liberation Front, MNLF, was organized in the late 16th, early 1770s by Normie Suari, a former professor of the UP. A goal of MNLF was to establish an independent Moro nation through an armed struggle. The armed group is mainly based on Mindanao. It is also a political organization in Philippines, accredited by the Organization of Islamic Conference or OIC. On September 2, 1996, Jakarta Accord brokered by OIC between MNLF and GRP was signed. This gave predominantly Muslim areas in Mindanao a decree of self-rule with establishment of ERMM. Normie Suari became regional governor and many of the MNLF armed units were integrated into AAP. The MNLF leader was nevertheless later arrested in 2001 and still under house arrest today. He is very popular in the Philippines, but his attempt to collaborate with GRP was seen as a mistake by some, including MI. According to MN, reported, so here's the picture. So according to NN reported, still counts more than 20,000 supporters. To summarize the relations between civilian and MNLF, preparing support revise from peasant, he says, "You don't cut hands with which feed you." A tripartite meeting was set on July 2007 between MNLF, GRP, and OIC in order to revise 1996 Jakarta Peace Accord. It was however delayed. Normie Suari said the Feed mission and MN never attacked but only defended itself, and he insisted on brotherhood with his friends, indigenous and Christians. MNLF is not listed as a terrorist organization. So I think you are familiar with interview with Suari, who is under house arrest in the presence of spiritual leader of NLF and under the surveillance of a guard. The more Islamic Liberation Front, the MI, broke away from MN on 1977. In order to put more emphasis on the Islamic roots of movement, it views poverty, land issues, and economic underdevelopment in Mindanao as a result of colonization of the Bangsamoro people by the Philippine government. So the MI was established by Ustaz Salamat Hashim, that's who you read it, who became its chairman. Before his death on July 2003, issued a statement denouncing terrorism and reiterated MI committed to achieve peace to the political statement. MI also claims to be committed to make use of anti-personnel landmines strictly for defensive purposes and in indiscriminate manner. MI is nevertheless carrying its cease as a war of self-determination. Spokesperson told the Feed mission and MI never initiated violence but responded when it was attacked by soldiers violating its territory. Admitting that this might have caused collateral damage, he added, terrorism was not an issue but it was a theme exploited by government. Like MN and MI also acknowledged that lost commands and lawless elements taking refuge in the territories, but disowned by their leadership might be responsible for acts of violence. MI is not listed as a terrorist organization by the US and the Philippine government, but it continues to be target of the anti-terrorism campaign of the latter and having links with Al-Qaeda and Jemaah Islamiyah or GI. MI recognizes having been approached by the latter but denies any collaboration with it. MI is said to have about 12,000 to 12,500 members. It is mainly based on Mindanao and, like MN reported, receives popular support. GRP-MILF peace negotiations started on January 1997 and went back and forth until now. Attacks allegedly perpetrated by MI against civilians supposed link in GI and hostile attitude of the government towards MI, notably explain that the process has been slowed down. Okay? Abu Sayyaf or Jemaah Islamiyah and Raha Sulaiman movement, the three aforementioned groups appeared more recently in the Philippines and reported have links with Al-Qaeda. According mainly to information provided by the US authorities, depending on interlocutor from the civil society, Feed has told that they are a US product or even do not exist. The majority of the people met by the mission agreed on the fact that they only consist of few criminals led more by profit than any ideology. Human Rights Watch, however, listed a series of attacks perpetrated by those groups. So like MN and MILF, they are mainly located in southern islands of the Philippines, northeast, south, sa baba. However, both MN and MI claim to distance themselves from partnership with these extremist and armed groups. Individual Jemaah Islamiyah or JI or MILF members may however join military alliances with Abu Sayyaf group or ASG. ASG and JI are working increasingly with Rasulaiman movement or RSM militant converts to Islam based in Manila and northern Luzon, who are a vehicle for more experienced terrorist groups to move into the country's urban heartland. Abu Sayyaf and Jemaah Islamiyah are considered by the USA as terrorist organization as well as by AAP, which also listed RSM as a terrorist organizations. We have here the sources. You can read it on your own. Just click that or type that. And here are the questions to further analysis and watch. You also watch this video. So here's the first question. What is the motive or intention of the terror attack? For you, search that. Maybe it would come up to our exam. Maybe. Do you think the attack will satisfy their cause or motive? How about the damages? How about the deaths? Would it satisfy? How do you think should the government respond to such attacks? Okay, so thank you for this topic. I think we are listening